In this video, I will provide you with a few things to think about when locating windows on your home. And I do realize that there are a lot of people out there doing their own remodeling and even building new houses who might need a little more information about locating their windows in a single-story house. So let's go ahead and get started with the number one location you're going to be looking for, and that would be to center the window in a room. And all this means is that the distance from the wall to the window on both sides will be exactly the same. And of course, the next thing on the list will be the height of the window. These are usually going to be the same as the doors in the house. And most doors are 6 foot 8 inches tall, and the rough framing height for a door header, bottom of the door header, is usually going to be 6 foot 10 inches on a home with 8 foot ceilings. If you have taller doors, you have a 7 foot door or an 8 foot door, then you might want to raise the windows. Once you start raising the height of the windows, there's a good chance you're going to be increasing the height of the window. So the average person will have access to open and close the window. And another thing you need to keep in mind is that there are usually minimum heights for windows of 42 inches. However, you need to check with your local building department to verify that measurement, along with a minimum of 20 inches by 20 inches for the opening to get out of the window in case there's an emergency like a fire. Now let's go ahead and get back to the window locations. You can lower the sill height or raise it. However, you're usually not going to raise the top of the window. And you might not be able to see it from here, but if you want the top of the window trim and the door trim to line up, you better spend a little more time trying to calculate the height of the window opening also. This is a common problem. I see it often, especially when the windows are within 12 inches of the door. And I cannot tell you how many times I run into a situation where I see the top of the door trim a little higher than the top of the window trim. Next up on the list, light switches and electrical outlets could be another problem for your windows, especially if the windows are going to be a little longer and closer to the doors. And this is another problem I've seen regularly, even with professional home builders. So make sure that you understand how wide the electrical light switch is going to be, or even stacking the electrical boxes if necessary. You might need 4 light switches, where you could always use 2 light switches on top, 2 on the bottom. Another thing to consider would be to make sure that the window is far enough away from the doorknob or the locking mechanisms on the inside of the house to prevent someone from breaking the window or breaking a part of the window and then reaching their arm in and unlocking everything to gain entry into your home. Another problem you might run into when trying to figure out the locations for your windows will be when you run into a situation like this where you don't have any room for the electrical outlets. And if that's the case, you can usually run them underneath the windows. However, if the windows go all the way down to the floor, then the outlets might need to be located in the floor, leaving us with another thing that we might not have considered when figuring out where we want to put the windows. And even though I mentioned centering the window in the room, you can center a window in between the wall and the door. However, I actually worked for a person one time who wanted the window centered in between the end of the door trim and the finished drywall. And this wasn't a problem for me because it was specified on the plans. However, it would have definitely been a bigger problem if I didn't notice it on the plans or wasn't notified. Next up, let's take a look at corner windows. It's not uncommon to have the windows in the corner right next to each other. However, this could create a problem for the finish carpenter. Now, most of the finish carpenters I worked with can figure this out and make it work. However, if the architect wants to run the trim, the wood trim, all the way around the windows, or create another effect, you need to know about that before you frame the house or do the remodeling of the wall framing for the windows. Again, I've ran into a situation like this before also. And of course, here's an example of what it would look like if you use two different sized windows. This is not a common construction practice. However, I thought I would throw it in there to provide you with an example of what it would look like. Another method for installing corner windows might be to have the windows come off a specific measurement, maybe a few inches off of the corner. However, this example would not be common because the windows would now be out of proportion. You would have a longer distance on one side than you would on the other. However, structural posts or plumbing, heating, and electrical could force the designer to do something like this. And in my opinion, problems like these should be solved during the design phase, and definitely not during construction. Another situation that might look a little awkward to a home designer would be to have a larger or smaller window a little further away from a corner. Or a situation like this might not be acceptable to a designer where you have two windows at opposite edges of the walls that would be different sizes also. Again, this looks a little odd and might look even worse from the outside. So let's go ahead and fix that with windows that are the same size. And of course, another situation that wouldn't be common when you pull one window away from the corner and you have another one right up against it. However, it wouldn't be a problem if they are the same distance, maybe 1 or 2 feet away from the corner. Or if we throw one in the middle and have each one of these distances the same size, or even change some of these measurements up. Have the same measurement here as we do over here, and then center this window in between these two windows. And by now you're probably getting a good rhythm of where I'm going with all of this. However, you could run into a situation like this as a builder and question the architect or designer, only to find out that they're going to put a large piece of furniture in that room. Another problem you could have when trying to figure out the locations of your windows, especially when dealing with a bed or a sofa. And this is usually not going to be a common building practice, because once the dresser is gone, now you have an odd situation. Taking us back to a situation that would look more like this. And if someone put the dresser in here, they would just simply cover up that one window. And another situation that wouldn't be common would be to raise or lower windows that are the same measurements away from the corners. However, if this is the look you're looking for, go for it. I do not want to discourage any creativity in this video, as long as you're doing it for a specific reason. So with that said, let's go ahead and install a longer window over here. Now, wait a minute, if you don't like that idea, let's install a longer window here so the bottom of the windows line up. So enough of the creativity. Let's go ahead and wrap this video up by taking a look at a small house. And this is actually one that I have more videos on. Let me know if you want me to put a link in the video comment area to those videos. And let's go ahead and start with the window here, centered in between the door and the wall. And this window here, centered in between the door that is open. We're centering it in from this point here to this point here. However, this window could have also been centered in between this point here if we just drew a line through here and this wall here. We do not have a window over here because the bed is going up against this wall. However, you could have put a window in there, or you could have had a couple of small windows on the side of the bed, and then no windows where the closet is, a window centered in between the bathroom walls. And this is going to be a smaller window. I believe it's only 12 inches tall and will also be a little higher than the other windows. Then we have a window that's basically centered in between the front of the refrigerator or the cabinet line here, if we ran this cabinet line through, because you could always buy a larger or smaller refrigerator to mess this up. And even though the sink is off a little bit, it's usually a common practice to center the window in back of the sink or center the sink in front of the window. Next up, let's go ahead and just kind of zip through a little close up here to give you a better idea of the windows, maybe the sizes. And you can see here that this is a 4010. It's 4 foot wide by 1 foot tall. This window here is 5 foot wide. You can see 5 foot measurement here, and it's 3'6" or 42 inches tall. Next up, let's go to the outside of the building where we can see by adding trim to the outside of the door will create problems for our straight lines here. This window should have been raised a little higher, or it should have been adjusted for trim to go around it and be positioned to where the top of the trim lines up. And you can see where if this window wasn't here, it really wouldn't be a problem. You might not even notice it because this window here is so far away from the door. Let's go to the kitchen wall where we have the kitchen sink window. And whether or not this has trim around it doesn't really matter because there's nothing to line it up with. Another thing to consider with exterior views. And of course our bathroom window a little higher to make the tub surround work. The top of the bathtub surround needs to be taken into consideration. This window is just going to be a little out of whack. Not much you can do about it unless you want to raise the rest of the windows around the entire house. And let's go ahead and wrap this video up by just taking a quick tour of the inside of the house to give you an idea of what the windows look like and why the bathroom window needs to be raised a little higher than the other windows. So that's it for this video. If you have any questions at all or additional suggestions about window locations in a single-story house, feel free to share them with us in the comment area.